My first question is, do you think that there is a true quarterback competition that is open, especially starting here in spring ball? PJ sort of commented that our offense is going to be centered around the quarterback. At least that's how he envisions it from now on. And to me, that kind of goes beyond, I guess, just like, the tangibles of a quarterback. Like there's leadership. Literally, your skill set is probably the focus of the whole entire offense. So, I guess with that being said, given what we know about these two quarterbacks, who we assume one of them will be the starter, do you think that there is an open competition?
Well, I think that in the coach's eyes, I think Drake Lindsey is the starter. I know PJ was just on the Big Ten, like you mentioned, said it's a wide open competition, and maybe it should be. I just think that they really want Drake Lindsey to be that guy. And I'm not saying it's like a mountain that Zach Pyron has to come in here as a transfer and overcome. But I think that, that Drake Lindsey is going to get the first team reps right away off the get go, just from being here a whole year. They kept talking about how much he was what I can't remember what they said. He was attached to Brosmer's side, is what they were saying, just like a sponge absorbing as much as he could. So, yeah, Zach Pyron's definitely got the experience edge, and I don't think like if Lindsey comes out struggling in spring practice, I don't think it would take super long for him to get a serious look at one. But if you're asking me straight up, is it a dead even, like wide open race? I don't. I think the coaches do have a preference for Drake Lindsey to take over.
Yeah, it's definitely got to be Lindsey's job to lose, right? Like he still has to earn it, and it's not like Pyron is just going to be locked in as the backup. But yeah, and I I think to some extent too, right? Like PJ kind of has to say it's an open competition just because I mean, if you know you're going to be the starting quarterback, like what does that do to your your mentals and your focus going into spring ball
Right.
too? So to an extent, like yeah, it's not truly open, but it's definitely got to be more Lindsey and just the. I mean, I know Pyron's got the experience advantage, but Lindsey being in the offense for a year and like you said, kind of studying under Max, who was like supposed to be this mental wizard. So hopefully he kind of picked up on some of what he did and just his, I guess his routine and his preparation too, and being able to study defenses and actually understand the offense at that level. Whereas Pyron's coming in has got to learn a brand new offense and try to figure it out and get to know all the players on the team even too. So
Right.
um, yeah, it seems like it's definitely going to be Lindsey's job to lose. I hope they both. I hope they make it a tough decision, right? Like you want both guys to be that good and perform that well to make it.
Yeah.
They could both start if needed. So
Well,
Yeah.
and kind of to what you were saying there, and then Spencer, I'll let you jump in on this. Like, you don't get a lot of benefit of just coming out and naming Lindsey the starter, right? One, you want him to push for it, and not saying he wouldn't, but like you just don't want to hand it to him. And two, if he does come out spring practice and it's clear that he's not your best option, you're not gonna want to like just kill his confidence by like trying to force him in there. Comes out in spring ball and he's clearly not ready yet. That's just going to tank his confidence by making it competition. Then he's actually got to work for it rather than trying to be handed the job and failing. That's gonna affect your demeanor a lot more rather than just losing out an actual true QB battle, which I think this one, like we said, basically is. But Lindsey's definitely got the leg up.
Yeah. I agree. I Here's the thing for me. I think selfishly, I do want Lindsey to be the starter because of what you said, Kurt. He's kind of taking the back seat, watching Brosmer, who had a great year, learned from him. And I feel like the skill set for Lindsey, specifically on his feet, I think that he can be a little more athletic than maybe Brosmer was. It's to be seen, but I just think that, he's capable of that. But I do gotta say, Pyron, he is able to move around the pocket and avoid sacks, and that's something that he did a good job at. But the problem is his consistency. I saw a lot of kind of short and intermediate passes at Georgia Tech that he's thrown and done well, but very inconsistent with the deep ball. Now, Granted, if you're last year, we didn't really throw the deep ball much, and if we just want to rely on that this next year, I guess that's okay. But if we really want to see this offense kind of expand and go beyond of what it has been, we need to get that deep threat going. And I'm just not convinced that from what I've seen on tape that he is able to do that. And with Lindsey, though we don't have much tape on it either, I just feel like him learning from Brosmer, him being in the system for the past year, him being young and having opportunity to grow still, I think ideally he's the guy. Um, but I do think that it should be a competition between the two. It kind of fires you up. You really get to see good reps. You get to see who is the better quarterback. And, I'm just hoping it's not like, we've seen this in college football, you know, you put in a quarterback for a few drives and then you go to the next quarterback. And I don't want to see
Oh,
that sort of back and forth sort of thing. And that's talking beyond this open
right.
quarterback battle. But I hope it's just really solidified who's the guy and they have the confidence to kind of take us places over the course of the season.
I agree. I think Pyron, just with his mobility, I think he's gonna play either way, even if he
Sure.
doesn't win the job. Um, looking at his old highlights, Georgia Tech, um, he had multiple games with over 60 yards rushing, and he's not like a speed demon. He's just a tough physical runner. I mean, he moves a lot better than what we've had at quarterback for sure. But so that's a nice wrinkle to have if he does get the job. But yeah, I think that is probably a selling point for Zach Pyron to get here. You give him a shot at the starting job, and then also like, hey, we also really like what you do. I think he'll be used, as like your goal line, and not even strictly wildcat. I just think he'll be in there to run like more of a read option, where it's not just our quarterback standing there looking at the D end and not ever going to pull it like we've seen in the past. But
Right. Yeah. Um, well, let's kind of just talk, kind of branching off of this. What if Pyron is the starter opening day against Buffalo? Is that concerning, do you think? Or do you think that's a legitimate win and he's probably the guy that, being a redshirt junior, he might be the guy for the next, I guess, 2 seasons?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a chance that Pyron really is just that much better than Lindsey and earns it, but it does feel like it's more likely that Drake just didn't prove enough or didn't show enough or didn't gain enough trust in the coaching staff to be able to earn the starting job. And I would probably be disappointed just because we've heard a lot about Lindsey coming up the last couple of years. He was like the the guy coming in. He was going to be the next one after Brosmer. We had all last year of him, hearing all about the time he spent with Max and how good he was looking and how he was progressing, and then all of that to just come to an end with a transfer quarterback coming in from Georgia Tech, would kind of just be a dud, I guess.
right,
Yeah.
So
well, let's be honest. There's like maybe an unfair stigma to just like you bring in a transfer that was a backup at another Power Four school
right,
that like wasn't Ohio State or Alabama or like a top tier team, right? And so you're hoping like, okay, like good depth to what we already have because we've been hyping up our own guy. So there's like this unfair already probably like stigma attached to if Zach does just outright win it.
right. Like
Um,
it'd just be bad optics overall. Like
yeah, but like program concerns, I wouldn't be concerned if he's not like ready per se, like just right away. Like
sure,
I mean, but definitely disappointed, right? I mean, like you mentioned, uh, big arm coming out of high school. He threw for over 4,000 yards. I think it was like almost 50 touchdowns. It was like 40 some touchdowns his senior year, and I think he won Arkansas Gatorade Player of the Year. But like, I do think there's a chance that Zach's abilities could suit him better for the starting job, just based on how the rest of the team looks around him. We've already mentioned Zach's mobility. Like, you know, we're coming off a year where the O line really struggled, and we have at least two guys that are probably going to be drafted, potentially three. And for whatever reason, it wasn't meshing, and now you're bringing a bunch of transfers. So I'm just saying, like, we feel good about the O line just based on what we brought in, but we felt good last year and didn't perform. I think there's a scenario just based off his experience, his toughness running the football, where like if your O line's really struggling again, it might not even be a Drake Lindsey development issue. It might be that Zach Pyron just needs to be the starter because your O line is struggling to protect Lindsey and he's not as mobile as Zach Pyron. I do think that's a real possibility. I'm not saying it's a high probability of happening, but I do think there are other factors like that to consider. But if Zach does win the job, I watched his first start against Virginia Tech. He is mobile. He runs tough. You know who he runs a lot like? Because he takes a lot of high shots. He runs like Mitch Leidner. And people might be down on that, but you look back at Mitch Leidner's career, I think he had over 1,400 career rushing yards. So he was no slouch running the football. He's a physical runner. That's who he runs like to me. Now, the passing game, I only watched one game. It wasn't bad. He actually, they run a lot of like quick read, RPO, flick out stuff, and then shots down the field. And he actually hit like his first 3 deep shots, but it wasn't like driven in there, right? Like I wouldn't say it was like a big strong arm throw. He was able to float it, but lead them, right? Which is okay if you can actually be accurate like that. Where Lindsey's upside is more like he does have the big arm. He can drive it into those windows. We're hoping to create more explosive gains out of the passing game with him as the quarterback this year compared to Brosmer, who was more of a quick hitting intermediate type player, right? So that's like the differences in passing styles, I think. I don't think it's like Pyron can't take shots down the field. It's just he probably can't drive it there on a line like how we've seen Lindsey do, at least at high school. I know college is way different, but Drake's a big kid, so that's kind of the hope there. But yeah, I want it to be Drake Lindsey's job for sure, just with the hype behind it. But if Zach Pyron's the guy, I'm not gonna lie, I was more impressed than I thought I would be just looking into him. I kind of got excited about just how physical he is, and there was more in the passing game than I thought I would see. I'll say that.
Yeah.